Aye.
Okay. Ready?
All right, we're going to get started. Welcome to another workshop session of the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee. Since tonight is a working group meeting for us, we're going to save public comment until the very end. Please try not to disrupt our conversations. We'll call on you with your hands up at the end of the session. We're in Chapter 4, Housing, and we went through the two boards last session, and today we're going to go over the comments that we've received. I'm going to begin by going over the minutes from October 17th meeting.
I was wondering with item number 4 on page 2, Zoning Board of Appeals and Planning Board should develop strict criteria for evaluating variance applications and enforce them. That was part of our conversation,
Okay.
perhaps.
And the last bullet point on that page, businesses that want to build housing for their employees.
And
And I think there needs to be something else there.
I think we just started talking about that, so I don't know that it really had an and. I think we brought up the fact that it was a concern, that the concern was that there isn't enough housing for workforce employees. So we can,
There was also a concern about building
building
these houses.
What do they call them, boarding houses or
Rooming houses.
rooming houses? Yeah.
So maybe just concerns about businesses that want to build
Right.
houses.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll make that.
Is that even technically legal with our current code, that we can allow non-related people to live in?
Well, we,
So-
family, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's very, the
Difficult.
definition of a family has been broadened significantly. So essentially, it's a group of people who live and act in.
Have some common
Right.
tie.
They share meals or
They work at the IGA.
they work at the IGA.
Okay.
Now, but
Or
we
they-
do have, what we do have in our town code though is 2 people per bedroom. You know, so that's one lever that already exists. And other than that, we'd have to come up with some specifics.
Right. All right, so with those 2 amendments, are people okay with the?
Approving them and having those amendments made.
I wasn't sure, so.
Okay.
The only thing is that
Yeah.
if you read this, it doesn't tell you what we talked about. So something about, we discussed, several these were the topics we
Discussed.
talked about.
Right.
You know, you can't go into all the details of the discussion, but at the same time, you don't want people thinking that this means something, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. No, it's-
Don't put meaning on there,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's why she wrote, discuss Chapter 4 housing comments and boards, and these were the several topics received.
Okay, all right, okay,
It's
that
just
makes,
a list of the topics we touched on.
That's
For a
good.
full dialogue, you have to go to the
yeah, I meant.
There's no evaluation or,
Not in the minutes, because it was too
Conclusion.
complicated. We attempted to do that, it was a nightmare. So,
No, that makes sense.
yeah,
But the people could see, well, they talked about the topic that I was very passionate
right.
about.
And so they can log in and
Go in, yeah.
Okay. And the revised draft will reflect decisions that the task force comes to, right? Okay.
So with those things in mind, do we have a motion to approve the minute?
I move to accept the minutes as written, or as adjusted or changed,
corrections.
modified.
should come before the discussion technically for, so, but I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're right, and you know, so few of the committees
Yeah.
do that, but
Yeah,
you're right.
it's
They
a
should.
motion
to-
and then and then an amendment and then.
Right. Gotta remember that, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. So now we're going to go into the comments. I did receive, 2 meetings ago, I mentioned that I had reached out to CAS to get better statistics on who they served. And so as of 10/20/23, on a regular biweekly basis, they serve 75 families on Shelter Island, 200 individuals, 15 of those are seniors, 23 of those are adults,
How many are seniors?
15. I can give you the statistics, I'll forward it to everybody. 23 are adults age 50 to 62, 49 are adults age 18 to 49, and 57 are children.
Wow, that's a lot.
So it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of younger people. So the
children
younger
number-
demographic is
The
struggling.
children's number does sort of align with what the school has told us as well.
Right.
But the number of 200 individuals served, that's a lot more than when they started. They've clearly built a, yeah.
And that number is consistent year round. It doesn't have a lot of seasonal fluctuation. So
Yeah.
that's something that we need to consider.
I think some of the pressure of too much of your income going to housing shows up in that. Those statistics.
And that's not, doesn't even reflect what the food pantry,
The
the
staple food pantry does, you
Right.
know, that fills in between, because Cass is not here twice a month.
So I'm waiting for some information back from them.
And what chapter was that connected to?
That's connected to some of the demographic chapter and then also the quality of life chapter.
Right.
There's a section
That
on
needs-
poverty and.
Maybe
another
needs to
one
be
on
expanded
mental
or
health.
something like that, because that was one of the major comments at
Yeah,
the meeting.
yeah.
Yes.
Emailed on the.
So I was trying to collect some more information before I revised it. So when we get to
Probably
that
does work.
chapter 9, we'll have more data by then. So we should.
16.
16. Thank you.
All right. Should we go through the spreadsheet first?
Yes.
Okay. So the first comment on the spreadsheet, it's from 9/9/23. It's comment 128, housing. I'm not sure, it's the first housing comment.
Yep.
The introduction of public water allows for increased density by variance per Suffolk County Department of Health Services of 4 dwelling units per acre, which the comp plan indicates shall never be allowed. As a point of reference for density, this is approximately the density of the older neighborhoods in the Heights. Within preference surveys conducted as part of the Peconic Bay Regional Housing Act Advisory Board, the strong preference was expressed for community housing above retail in the center. For this type of housing to be available, a density of 4 dwelling units will be necessary to support this type of development.
Let's stop. I think there's a basic misunderstanding here in this comment. The density, the recommendation for perhaps increased density, should infrastructure allow, is in the business district. Okay, I think that's what this is, it kind of starts off by saying that the comp plan indicates shall never be allowed. So I think what the comp plan has said is the residentially zoned areas will not increase density beyond the one prime, you know, what we've said, and then it's in the business district that exploration could take place. And that's also in the housing plan, that, you know, above retail.
Right.
So that's, number one's been addressed.
And so then the second half of that comment is that the construction of community housing with associated unit sizes of approximately 850 square on town-owned land should also be subject to a density of 4 dwelling units per acre to address affordability due to land costs and recognize that the size of community housing units is less than half of the size of market rate housing in terms of creating viable community housing neighborhoods and having enough units to support shared amenities. The 4 units per acre density is preferred and comparable to square foot density of all other housing on the island. So at the moment, we don't have the infrastructure to support 4 units per acre. So until, or if that ever happens, you know, 2 units is really what the county allows. They do have different calculations for community housing. So when you have multiple dwelling units in one structure, they calculate it differently, and they actually calculate it at a stricter sanitary loading rate. So you don't get the 3 full, like, so if I'm going to build a house, I get 300 gallons a day of sanitary flow is what they assume for me. But if we're building community housing and you have 3 apartments in one building, you actually have a tighter flow rate. You're only given 280 gallons per day per acre for that one unit. So it's a challenging, complicated calculation. So really it's your acreage and the square footage of the structures you're building and how many apartments you're going to have. It's the acreage of the land that dictates how many apartments you can have in a building.
Oh, you're talking about Suffolk County regulations.
Suffolk County Department of Health.
We have to follow
We have to follow
regardless.
regardless.
Yeah.
And you can apply for a variance, but it's unlikely that they will give you a variance for double density for community housing.
Yeah.
They might give you 1.5 of your typical allowed density, but they wouldn't give you double density, which would be the 4 units. So it's,
Last time we talked about how it might be necessary to have more than 2-bedroom apartments. I mean, 850 square feet is relatively small. It's like a studio apartment. But if these are young families with kids, you could conceivably have 4 people, you might need possibly 3 bedrooms at
Exactly.
least. So
yeah.
I don't know how that factors into the Suffolk County rules, but I guess that
Well,
they trump everything else.
and the option we have is that we can do, so on 1 acre, you can have a single-family residence. You could have a 3-bedroom, single-family home with an accessory apartment. So let's say we have the 1 acre lot down here on 114. We can do a single-family home with 3 bedrooms, and then you can do a cottage with 2 bedrooms. So you can have those 2 year-round affordable housing structures on 1 acre. So you can kind of accommodate it that way.
There's no change to Suffolk County.
Yes,
Everybody's going to be
that's-
happy, no problem.
Right.
I understand.
So it's adding 2 additional units to that 1 acre. So 2
So when you
primary
start
houses,
having like an
you can't
apartment
do that. You can't
complex,
double
yeah.
down.
Got it.
So we can get the 1 house with the accessory, but you can't have 2 primary homes and 2 accessory homes. They won't allow that. It's too much for that acre.
It's in that specific lot, because there's commercial things both sides, which are not high water use places, and you have open space behind.
Yep.
Would there be a better chance of getting a variance if you want? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know.
They would take all of that into account. But it still depends on your total acreage. And I think that's shy of an acre.
Okay,
So, it's going to be hard to get more than, what the septic well separation would allow you to, too. So, it's, anything that we design will be designed with the potential for an additional structure in the future should infrastructure show up. But, it's going to be based on what we're allowed to do. Just because we're not allowed to do it, we can't do it. Okay. So the next one, the proposed goals for limiting the size of housing.
number, please.
138, was on 9/11. The proposed goals for limiting the size of houses are fairly complicated. House size is a touchy issue and should be open for more discussion and input. I'm not aware of any community input sessions or surveys about house size during the comp plan process. It serves its own information and discussion group.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah.
That will happen when implementation happens.
Well, this is
There's that,
also.
Yeah, but this is one of people's major concerns.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so this actually kind of goes back to the moratorium on large homes. So the town is actually in the process of working on this topic and sorting out
Right.
the ways to handle it, the different ways to handle it. So,
What the comp plan does definitely say, though, is what you just said. People are concerned. People,
Yeah, that's true.
that they size in some way or form should be limited. And examples were given, when we had a lively discussion about that a couple of days ago about, are those examples, are those musts, or they shoulds, they're really examples for, just to get people to start thinking about it, what they might favor.
So I'm thinking, going back to something John said way back, I don't know when, about the fact that if this plan is adopted, it should be the guiding principle moving forward, which means saying things like that becomes critically important so that the town doesn't just say, well, let's just, whatever.
Carry on.
Yeah, carry on, let's just
Right.
get this exemption, that exemption, that it should be the guiding force. And that was one of the points of the letters in the paper this past week, that, is that gonna happen? The cynicism was it wouldn't. But I think that that's pretty key here.
Absolutely.
well, and that comes back to one of the recommendations Sean made at the last meeting, which was that we should be clear in what the goal of the goal is.
Yeah.
So, because like the conversation we had the other
I
day,
think shouldn't be
it
optional.
shouldn't be
Yeah.
shots, codes, woods.
Yeah.
But more direct
Yeah.
and kind of more defined in what the thought process was, so that it's not so open to interpretation later.
Okay.
All right, the next one is 152 and 923. This is an excellent document. The inclusion of a sentence like this, and quote, "It is important to affirmly state that if public sewers and water supplies are built, the residential density of existing residentially zoned areas should be maintained and should never exceed 2 units per acre. This should allay any fears associated with a central sewer district, short of mandating IA systems, which seems onerous. This seems the most responsible public solution to cleaning up the groundwater in the center."
So we have that language somewhere. I know we played
Yes,
with
we
it.
do.
So,
Yes. So he was saying that he approves of that kind of language.
End of the dual goals.
Right.
Cleaning up the water,
Right.
keeping the island densities the way they are, with the small exception of business.
Okay.
The next comment, I think we addressed last meeting.
Yeah.
Let's identify which one we're talking
So
about.
it's 155, 924, 23, and it's, unfortunately, this section begins with key findings that is insulting to those of us who spent years living off island, working toward the time when we could live here full-time, that we were not interested in or indifferent to town government or organizations perpetuate stereotypes about non-locals. How can you have a key finding without adequate data? When I read this, I immediately thought that it didn't bode well for the slant of the entire report and colored all of my reading after that. So I do think that we looked at that and we figured out,
Change the language.
But we got rid of it. We got rid of the stuff that implied that,
right?
rightfully so. I mean, it's.
yeah, rightfully
Take
so.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was corrected. Okay.
The next comment was 159 on 925. And it says goal 4-4, nearshore overlay district references do not track town code section 133-12, which refers to the nearshore peninsula overlay district. See also the corresponding chapter 11 goal 44A recommendation, page 7. It may occur in other chapters.
I think I'll look into that a little bit more closely and try to report back, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Might be a good catch there, we'll have to see, okay.
All right.
BJ to research,
I think in Lori's long email, she mentions this issue also,
okay.
Lori Beard Raymond.
Yeah, I'm not sure she gave us a code section like
Right,
this.
not the code
Yeah.
section, but
So-
this will help nail it down for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to be continued on that, let's remember.
Certainly the
back to it.
sentiment's come up a number of times.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right, yeah. Especially with the change of like wetlands ordinance taken care of in the planning board, people are obviously
nervous,
concerned
a
about how
little
that's
nervous, yeah.
happening or not happening.
All right. So BJ, you're on that one.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, number 169 from 927. Housing prices and affordability on page 30. The town requires a special permit for houses over 6,000 square feet, which may temper interest in building bigger homes. The first half of the statement is misleading and at odds with the town zoning code, section C1A of sections 133.6, District A, 133.7, District AA, 133.10. So it goes through the zoning districts, permitting residential uses to one-family dwellings with a SFLA under 6,000 square feet. Therefore, a special permit is required for 6,000 and over, not over 6,000. Also, this, okay, so that's a minor.
We want to clean up that semantics.
Yeah, because you want it to match what's there.
Semantics, and language, yes.
Page 30, so I'll go back and make that note. Let's see. Also, this restriction applies to all dwellings with sleeping quarters on the property in the aggregate, a primary house plus a guest house, and is not limited to new construction. For example, you build a house with a square foot of 5,000 square feet, and down the road, you decide to finish the basement, and you have, which will have 1,500 square feet, a special permit would be required because the total SFLA is now 6,500 square feet. So we can clarify that. Is it?
Yes. What we talked about, what is discussed in the plan is the idea of the illegal conversions, when you don't know, and they didn't want to do the special permit process, which is why what is being considered is to talk about a limit, and again, I'm spitballing, perhaps greater than 6,000 square feet, but it includes the entire box, and perhaps all the structures on that are, conceivably living space. So instead of 6,000, maybe you say the limit now is 9,000, but that includes everything.
But it's the same concept also if you have another building on the property. Well, this is a workout room, and this is
Yeah.
an office.
Oh, yeah.
and- Or this is a bedroom, but the other two are not, so I think they're all bedrooms until proven otherwise.
Right, exactly. And it's a way to get at this size thing
Right.
that we've been told.
I'm not even sure how you would prove otherwise.
Right.
Right,
Oh,
so in that case,
yeah,
it's
oh, you
saying,
would.
well, they're all living space, so we're
They're living
calculating
space,
all of it as living space.
Right.
Okay.
I'm kind of a fan for the over 6,000 square feet, frankly. I mean, my house is like a third of that, so
Yeah.
it seems huge to me.
Yeah, cleaning it is, what a chore.
Right?
I suppose when you don't clean your own home.
All right, so I'm gonna go down to 181 from 10.8, housing. As there are over 1,000 ADUs on the island, the town should encourage owners to come forward to bring their ADUs up to code without penalizing them. The recent grant by the CDCLI should extend to ADUs for ADU work required. The online application has many flaws and should be simplified. Okay, so it's really hard to figure out exactly how many ADUs are on the island because I've gone through all the assessor's data and it's so hard to tell what is actually like a living space and what's just like a building on, like,
Right.
or just an empty pool house or.
Second floor on a garage,
Like,
yeah.
we don't have a solid number on exactly how many livable spaces are on the island. So, I mean, and that's just very hard for us to tell. But what I can say is that for the ADU plus one grant, anybody who is coming forward and trying to use that grant to legalize a structure is not being, they're not being punished for having a structure that may not have been legal before or up to code.
And we did pass earlier this year, you can't use your ADU for short-term rental anymore. That was kind of big.
Yeah.
And it should have an impact. It won't be right away, but it should have an impact. So,
How is that monitored?
State. So the CDCLI and.
No, yeah.
Oh, I was thinking the grant. You're, yeah.
we have an enforcement officer and, that we haven't had before, in terms of, the extensive experience in code enforcement on the east end of Long Island in towns like this. So that's how it's enforced. That's how it's going to be enforced going forward.
Okay.
And we have one of the building inspectors who's like, a defined part of his job is just to monitor the rentals.
Yeah.
So he looks at all the online listings and he goes through and checks everything, because they're familiar with all the houses on the island at this point. And so it's his job to keep track of how often they're being flipped and when they're showing up on Airbnb or VRBO, and so they're tracking that. And as far as the online application goes, like, we have no say over that, but I'll let them know that the application could use some work.
I found it challenging also.
Did you?
Working through it,
Okay.
things just didn't make sense. Or they were blanks, you had to put only a certain set of answers there, but mine didn't fit there, so what do I do? So then I tried to make a phone call, what are you talking about? It just becomes
All
an
right.
issue.
Yeah, because CDCLI is in charge of all of that, they're running it.
But is the housing board helping, offering to help? I think if you have specific questions, the housing board or volunteers would try at least to help you.
Yeah, okay,
you-
well, I
if you wish.
was
And their emails are
struggling with the form, the online form.
So the form might benefit from some review.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, maybe, the thing I found that it had cookie cutter answers were expected. Some people are a little bit different in the way their house is designed, or like I'm at 10 and I have an ADU at 10A. So there's no place for me to say that. And when I submitted it, they came back with issues relating to my house. And I'm not applying for my house, I'm applying for the accessory.
Right.
So, this became an issue.
Yeah, the cookie cutter thing is definitely true.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want, if you need a variance, you're not invited.
Right.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is truth to it. I mean, substantial.
So you're saying, BJ, that our housing committee can also help someone
Navigate
maybe
the
navigate some of it
CDCLI.
if there's some things, and then that's also a way to help pass along to CD Weber.
Yeah, the problems.
Here are some of the problems we're finding with
So-
applicant.
So go,
There's some other issues that are developing with that too, is that people who have been long-term family, multi-generational property owners who would like to, and they've rented their house on the property, the family house, as a short-term rental for 20 years when the family isn't using it. They'd like to build an ADU on that extra-sized lot. It's over a normal-sized lot, and they can't because they don't live here year-round. And if you think about it, if the way they would use this is that then they would be there, probably living here year-round, but they can't make that transition now using this grant. So it kind of is.
Oh, it's using the grant that's the issue.
It's the way the grant, I guess, is worded and
Okay.
stuff like that. So I'm sure there are other people in the same situation, like an older couple, they want to retire here eventually, but they're not ready yet. So they could build something to augment income, and they can't really qualify because they don't live here now.
Well, I think the whole purpose and intention of the grant was to help people be able to stay in their home or stay on
Right.
their property. Because upstate, it's very hard and a lot of people end up getting pushed out of their homes and they just can't afford it. So it's a way to help augment someone's income so they can stay in their home.
and to provide community housing at the
Right.
same time, which
Right.
could be a family member.
Sure.
But if a requirement is that you are a full-time resident, that again, this is state money being managed by CDCLI.
Yep,
Oh, that's their rules.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And that
It's
being
one of those
said,
weird things. that-
yeah, I think that we did place most of the grant money. You know, it's 10.
Really, the first batch of money or the potential batch.
Yeah, and so that's really good because we did it quickly and they think they'll be able to reapply.
That's wonderful.
So we
know-
had, I think, 12 applicants who were able to move through the process and get approval.
Is there a waiting list by any chance?
Question,
I'm not
that I would
sure.
go to community,
Yeah, I'll
on the
ask them.
website and email
Yep.
somebody on
And
the
we did get
committee.
a lot of applicants who didn't qualify because they were like right on the shore, the near shore overlay or things like that. There's no zoning variances allowed.
It's Catherine Ryan, right, as the clerk,
I think so.
housing? Coco, do you know it's Catherine Ryan, the clerk at housing?
Yes,
Yes, so it's Catherine Ryan, C. Ryan.
Okay, I'll see her.
yes.
All right. All right, the next comment, 183 from 1010. It's similar to the one we read earlier. It's about the first key.
Oh, so that's been handled.
So that's been managed. All right. Let's see. So the next one is 193 from 1013. And I think this was a continuation from an earlier, because it starts at 4. I think there was another block for 1, 2, 3. Limiting house size, the plan contemplates both imposing limits on the construction of gigantic houses and significantly reducing the size of what can be built on a 1-acre lot. Public needs to discuss how to balance property rights with the needs to protect the environment and the character of the island, how best to close loopholes in the code, and how to change the practice of the town board granting special permits to get around code. A judge last month noted that the town board had previously granted 38 out of 38 applications for special permits to build oversized houses, and without opposition from the town, ordered it to grant a special permit for construction over 12,000 square feet
And that's being
furnished
appealed.
space and another
Just by the
almost 4,000 square feet of unfinished space. The town did appeal that ruling, so that's
6 months, at least. That permit won't be issued unless, the moratorium, we settle this. But I would also object, the plan contemplates significantly reducing the size of what can be built on a 1-acre lot. I think that ignores the nuance in that discussion, which is near shore overlay. It's in sensitive areas that these limits are being contemplated on,
Only in sensitive areas?
I thought,
No, that's not accurate.
it's not accurate, but, thank you. But,
I would think it should be,
3,200
Island
square
lots.
feet per
So-
for a acre.
okay,
So the floor area ratio concept is essentially for the whole island.
it is, okay.
So, but you can set that base for at whatever size you'd like. The
Plan doesn't make that recommendation.
The one that relates to the nearshore overlay is the, essentially the undersized lots,
That's it.
kind of restrictions on how big you can go on an undersized lot in the nearshore overlay. So that you're not overly taxing the resources there, because undersized lot, oversized home in a water-sensitive area, you're going to create water problems for not just yourself, but your neighbors. So that's more of a, like a practical idea. All right. Loosening zoning in the center. Despite the identity of who would benefit from this, the idea deserves full discussion, including whether a zoning change could be used to facilitate affordable housing without inviting other types of housing that would benefit a developer, but not the community. So this comes back to the B1 and the B zone, and we've already said that we were going to try to figure out a better way to handle that.
Tighten that up.
Obviously, it's not a good suggestion, the way it's written.
But we could change not the definition of B1, but increase or decrease the type of business that can be there.
Right.
And I think we've expanded, like in the A zone, we have a list of what you can do there. You can't run a construction company, but you park a truck there. I mean,
Right.
so we could just change those type of nuances, which would probably limit a lot of the things.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Because there's somebody who might want to put an East Hampton Y-sized building across the street here. What if they want to put an indoor pool and racquetball courts and all that on that land of Danny Calabro's? Is that B1? Sort of. You know, does it qualify?
Right.
It could be a municipal facility.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we want to say no to that if someone wanted to do it for us.
right.
Hypothetical.
So we'll have to go through that. We'll look at that more closely. The draft fails to focus sufficiently on promoting needed affordable housing as opposed to other types of housing that would have little or no benefit to the community as a whole, would increase demands on the other resources and infrastructure. For example, it does not suggest, as it should, that loosening zoning in the center for housing should be limited to allow affordable housing.
That's the same idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does this only in connection with allowing 4 units per acre in a business zone.
Well, I also
193?
I also think there is a need for housing throughout the spectrum, dependable year-round housing. Not everybody is an owner. And so,
haven't really addressed, it's come up in a couple of our discussions about the need for housing for the elderly.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And middle-income people who will never come up with the $500,000 down payment. You know, I mean, but maybe wouldn't qualify under affordable housing.
Yeah.
So I when it's private developer, a private person, looking to, put an apartment on a second story, if they can get X dollars, I think that those would be filled.
Yeah, I think they'd be filled as luxury apartments. I think how that would go.
You think?
I've never seen anyone put like a middle income housing up. It's always luxury apartments
Right.
when they do these things.
Right.
I don't trust them.
Right?
Fair.
I mean, they're in business to make money.
Yeah. So do we want to sort of tighten that down or to say?
Is this, how does this relate to the housing committee and
I was gonna say the
document that we have on
housing-
Housing plan, yeah,
plan.
does.
Yeah, it kind of covers it.
I thought it's really, it does say year-round, not as opposed, without the affordable, just year-round community housing.
Yeah. I'll have to look at it.
Okay.
Look at it again.
But we're going to promote the concept of affordable year-round housing? Or are we just saying year-round housing? What are we kind of, this is one of those could, should, what,
Well, ideally, it would be affordable year-round housing.
Right. But I,
locked into affordable? Or are we saying, like you're talking about, it becomes a luxury apartment?
right.
I mean, we should make a stand on that, I think, and that's maybe the point we're looking for.
Yeah. Maybe you can make it part of the special, right now, if someone wanted to do affordable housing in the B or B1 zone, they can get a special permit to do that. I mean, it could be part of a permitting process. If you're going to build a luxury apartment, you're going to have to get a permit for that. If you're going to do a year-round affordable, you get a permit for that. And so, there's always the option to deny something that looks like it's going to be, kind of not in keeping with what the goal is.
Yeah.
Because at this point, if you wanted to do something like that, you have to get a permit for it. You have to get a special permit. This concern is completely different from what is described in the consultant summary of the hearing, where it poses the straw man question: can affordable housing be made without the interest of the developer and in the public interest only? Of course, affordable housing will benefit a developer, otherwise the developer would not be interested in building it. The proper and compelling concern is that in many places in Chapter 4 and elsewhere, concepts raised in the draft plan open the door to the development, or to development that has little or nothing to do with affordable housing, or that would otherwise provide a benefit to the town greater than the burdens or risks that would accompany the development. So this is definitely a concern that people have, and they've voiced it.
But you can't tell people that they can't buy a $1 million home. I mean, you can't say, well, the only homes allowed to be built are affordable.
Right.
The only thing you can do is control the size, so that if I can't get my 12,000 square foot home, then I have to go somewhere else because I can't do it here. I mean, that would be the, zoning would be the way to control it.
And, I think sometimes there's a little bit of confusion when it comes to affordable housing, because you can have not-for-profit developers that do come in and build affordable housing. And so, their goal is housing, not necessarily making a profit off of that housing, but to help provide more housing. So it depends on, who the developer is and what the goal is. Partner with Habitat for Humanity, their goal is to build housing. It's different than if you had Farrell come over and he was going to build housing. There's different ways to look at it. So not all developers are the same. So that's kind of addressed in the housing plan, because they list the different ways that different partnerships that they could get into to help create affordable housing.
So, I don't want to get this too cumbersome, but would it be helpful to have some kind of like reference, like see housing plan, section 4 or something, or, because you don't want to repeat everything in the housing plan and our
Right.
comprehensive plan, but people are worried because they're not seeing these controls or the way the atmosphere is shaped.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Refer to page, section.
And I think at the beginning of this chapter, it states that the housing plan is an appendix to this plan.
Yeah.
So I believe it's stated kind of up front and center so that
But
people
probably
know.
it is to mention it a couple times as people are reading it, they're not remembering
Right.
it.
As we get towards the goals and objectives, just maybe reiterate that again.
Might also be like where Sean's suggestion of those action items, at the beginning of each chapter become important because, referencing maybe some of those appendixes that's the spot, where these certain plans or something are connected to those chapters.
Yeah.
Next. This chapter also contemplates public sewer and water, which are problematic, as addressed in my comments in Chapter 7. In so doing, it highlights that unless there is no preferable alternative, public sewer and water open the door to development, the type of unwanted development referenced above.
Noted.
So, yeah, we've kind of discussed that we do want to restrict, any
Rampant,
zoning.
a runaway
Yeah.
development. Yeah.
In residential.
Can I say something on this?
No.
We're going to wait until the end. So we're just going to have our discussions. We have your list of comments, so you're in this pile, so we're going to be going through yours.
Okay, and will I be able to respond?
No, not till the end.
We're going to try to keep it to the end so it's fair for everybody.
Or is that fair?
Because there are people online too. And so this is kind of our,
That's ranting all the time.
this is our work session. So we're going to be discussing all the comments and we're going to try to figure out how they work with the chapter and making edits and changes. So if we have questions, we can ask you. And so public comment's going to be at the end. Thank you.
And restricted to 3 minutes, right?
No, I've never restricted. All right. The contemplated tailored zoning approach for Sylvester Manor deserves close public scrutiny. We've already eliminated that.
Yeah.
Also
Where
that.
did that come from?
That came from a conversation that the consultants had with Sylvester Manor because they had a lot of questions about Sylvester Manor and what their role was. And so they had a conversation with Sylvester Manor, and that's where that came from. Because they said, oh, we have this plan to do housing, and
And they
so they're
just
like,
popped it in.
Yeah, which honestly, it sort of validates some of the criticisms of people that said this plan didn't look like what we had talked about before. And so catching it is important.
yeah, absolutely. All right.
But I think also something that was thought of that we hadn't thought of.
Right.
You know, that's not a bad
Yes.
thing either, to put, you know,
Because then we address it.
that's why we hired planners, you know, to just sort of give us
Right.
other insights.
Well, and there are things that, as planners, they look at it and they say, okay, what is good practice would be to look at your non-conforming areas and figure out if there's a way to make that a conforming zoning district. So they look at things like that. They look at, and of course, we didn't like the concept of creating a conforming zoning district for things that are non-conforming. However, they're like, it's best practice. So, that's where you're gonna have conflicts with their recommendations versus what the community wants, and that's what this is for. The next one is 208, 1014. This is the first, I think it's for the first key finding.
right.
Fails to point out that the rise in housing costs follows regional and national trends. It assumes shelter island housing problems are unique to the island, which they are certainly not.
We talked about that last time, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Let's see.
The entire island has an affordable housing issue.
Right, all of, and, yeah.
Long Island.
All of Long Island,
All of
yeah.
Long Island, yeah. And, well, it depends where in the nation.
Yeah.
Go to Pittsburgh, you're pretty good shape.
But in any upscale seasonal resort area.
Yeah.
where you're gonna have Block Island, Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, yeah.
Out west.
Blue sky, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. A comprehensive, okay, so then the next one is a statement on page 43 proposes an open door to changing zoning in the name of community housing. A comprehensive review of the town code is needed to ensure it is consistent with the goal of increasing year-round community housing opportunities. Ongoing or longer-term priorities include developing and implementing design standards for community housing, considering the potential for apartments over stores and offices, and supporting the establishment of a community land trust.
Is that an open door?
Yeah.
I don't think it is, because it's given parameters. It's given, it's for community housing specifically, so it's not just any and all development. And it considers specific things, like the potential for apartments over stores. A community land trust comes with its own restrictions and limitations and guidelines. So I don't necessarily know that it is. I mean,
And it's further detailed in the housing plan.
right.
Right.
So I think that we can move on from that.
Establish limit on size of new houses, specifics require public discussion, yes, we've established that. Address illegal conversions, the town needs to discuss enforcement as well as reducing house size, yes. Density in water, the draft includes part of our CPAC recommended language. If public sewer and water supplies are built, the residential density of existing zones should be maintained, but then adds not exceed 2 units per acre, which is double current zoning. It's actually not.
It's,
Well, no, because it's 1 unit and an accessory.
it doesn't
We're fine.
says so, it says 2 units.
Okay. It also excludes from the restriction building on small lots and using cluster subdivisions, which also adds density. And it suggests additional housing types and densities in business zones. Basically, the draft only gives lip service to our recommendation. The draft focuses upon ways to increase density. So the thing with cluster subdivisions is that you actually maintain density, but you put the development in one area, so you have larger open space. So you maintain the density that's allowed, but it's just organized differently. And there's actually.
And exceed the total carrying capacity of that land.
Right, you can't exceed the total carrying capacity, but what you do is by clustering the development in one area, you actually have less negative environmental impact because it's more open space and there's less disturbance to all that open space. So instead of having a million dry wells all over the place, piping everywhere and digging everything up, if it's in one location, it's much less disturbing.
It could just be that, just the whole idea of the dense suburban development bothers people,
Yeah,
which I get.
yeah. I mean, our current land pattern is suburban sprawl. I mean, the 1 acre zoning leads to just suburban sprawl. It's not a walkable community necessarily, you know, you're reliant on cars or bicycles or things to get around. But that's just what we've established over time, given the fact that we don't have that infrastructure that lets you have more dense building.
I'm wondering about, we use this phrase not to exceed or just the idea of 2 units per acre. Should we define that as 1 unit, 1 housing and a accessory or something? Because 2 units, well, that means I can build 2 3-bedroom houses.
Accepted.
I mean, I'm almost tempted to just take out not to exceed 2 units per acre, because if we're saying that, where was the line? If we say public sewer and water supply are built, the resident density of existing zones should be maintained, period. So if we say that, you don't necessarily need to define what that is.
Okay.
Because as it is, that's dependent upon health department regulation anyway. So,
Yeah, but we want to make sure the zoning, that the recommendations here will apply regardless of the health department. Do you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, but in that case, we should identify it differently.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you say 2 units per acre, that's based off health department regulation, not our current zoning code. So we should base it off the current zoning code.
Yeah.
So whatever,
is
however
more
we
stringent?
define it,
Sounds
however
like
we
it.
define it in the zoning code is how we should define it here.
With a reference zoning code 2.4 or whatever.
Yeah, maybe that'd be a.
Or what we can say is, existing zoning should be maintained as of zoning code dated and use our most recent version of the zoning code. So, you know, for A zone, this is your standard, for B zone, this is your standard. That might be a better way to handle
I
it.
agree.
Okay, got it.
So that you can always look back and you know
Right.
that was the benchmark. That might be less confusing for people.
Yes. Well, and as, tighten it up, less room for maneuver, but, you know,
Right, less wiggle.
yeah.
That's wiggle.
Negative
We like
maneuvering.
that.
Use the language of the zoning code, okay.
Yeah. The draft states, consider second floor apartments above businesses in BB1 zones and consider 4 units per acre in business zone if affordable housing and infrastructure are included. We need to know how this will affect non-conforming uses in these areas. Well, if it's non-conforming, it would have to go through the special permit process to do any changes. So it would absolutely depend on the permitting process.
The thing I think concerns people is that that has not been a very effective way of managing things in the past. The special permit process has been very full of, it's like Swiss cheese. It's got more holes in it than it's got practicality. And I just think, you know, and we have evidence of how it's happened and people remember that. And I don't, you know, if there's some way we can either obviously change the zone or change our language here that we hope to have more specific controls on that type of thing, or that permitting process is more finite, that, no, you know, I don't know. It would depend upon what the individual applicant, what they're asking for, but
Yeah.
we gotta tighten that up.
Yeah, and for B and B1 zones, if something is non-conforming, it's kind of hard to find something on that list that wouldn't be conforming in the B and B1 zone. Maybe the structure itself wouldn't be conforming to zoning, in that sense, it would need a zoning board of appeals approval for changes. I'm just trying to think through the process of what the steps
Yeah.
would be if you had something not, I'm trying to think of an example of what a non-conforming in the B zone would be.
All
It's the heights.
The storage units down here on 114, that was non-conforming. It required a special permit. It also required a public hearing, which was not
Right.
held.
And site planning.
And site plan, which was not done. And the same thing across the street.
Right.
Same thing there. So those things slip through the cracks, we'll just call it that.
Yeah, so we need to tighten that process.
There's got to
Going
be,
back to like enforcing the zoning that already exists.
but that, like,
But even
yes.
before that, but even before that, it's tightening up the permitting process.
Yeah, okay,
So that
Once they have the
procedure
permit.
doesn't allow that type of thing to
Right.
happen again.
well, yeah.
You're making the language, must have a hearing, must have, I don't know what we do specifically, I haven't looked at the language, but something has to go, that's changed there.
So we may need to add, maybe add a goal that is review and strengthen the special permit process.
No, that's
or
good.
Strengthen the parameters of a special.
Right, this is governance, but it's also zoning.
Process and implementation thereof.
Yeah,
Right.
all right.
We did talk about that when we talked about the guidelines that should be established by both the zoning board and the planning board for
Right.
any kind of exceptions.
Right,
et cetera.
establishing stronger criteria.
Right, so it's kind of already issued, you know?
I'm just thinking that that's a major job. It's like when you came up to define what a how long, no offense, how long did it take you to do that? You know,
The
this is,
state did it for us.
okay.
They tell us what a family
It's
is.
complicated, so they're trying to get this definition, so.
Okay, just this next one, 4.3, identified sites for year-round rental, design them so that they can expand. Do we want to build an expansion? This is the idea of if there is someday a way to add, especially to perhaps the South Ferry site, because it's a bigger piece of land, if someday there's infrastructure to add, that's B zone, if it's built now in such a way that what is allowed now is on one little part of the parcel, first of all, that's open space, which is lovely. And if in the future, more can be added because there's the ability to do so, that's all that means. It doesn't, it means don't sprawl out and use the whole, parcel for not only that reason.
Be efficient in your construction.
Yeah. So I think that,
But unfortunately, things evolve over time.
yes.
And because boards change, something was done 15 years ago, all of a sudden they want to come back and do something else. You have a whole different group of people, and they say, oh, yeah, sure, that's fine. That happened too many times on the planning board, and I just like, wait a minute, where's the rules? And it's just like, the rules keep changing.
Right.
Yeah.
So defining it,
Well, there is some qualification here under 4.3 in our plan,
Yeah.
that which conform to the standards, but is designed in a way that could be expanded if necessary infrastructure become available in the future.
Yeah.
That's the caveat.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just sort of a good basic planning practice. Like, if you're gonna build your home and you only have a limited amount of money, but in the future, you may wanna add an addition, you're gonna design that home with space for a potential addition in the future. You're not gonna go and build in the middle, so now you have no space. Like, you're gonna just smart planning. It's, arranging your property in such a way that, should you need to build an apartment off the side, you
I
can.
think what is troubling perhaps is that if the infrastructure becomes available, that sort of means public water and public sewers. And that's what is scary.
But it's not,
Not the siting of the structure on the lot, but the fact that it's.
Open sesame to
it's
those
an
sorts of
open
things.
sesame to,
we've already stated in we not change density, whatever.
in the
it does,
residential
In
areas.
a residential area.
B zone, there is some opening,
Flexibility.
flexibility.
And we have a lot of.
But this
oh, sorry.
specific comment, because we've talked, and I'm sure we'll come back to it again more than once, but this specific comment, yes. The answer is actually yes. We do want to build in, there's a reason to not, there's two reasons not to sprawl over the whole property. Environmental, it's nice to have the open space too. We might be able to come back and fill in later. Just leaving your options open. Yeah. I think, okay.
It's doing it under a controlled circumstances.
Yes.
Right.
Not just
Yeah.
carte blanche, do whatever you feel like now.
Right. Goal 4.5, let's see, 5. It says that this item starts off by stating the need to strengthen subdivision ordinance to create more open space. Then it backtracked to suggest a strategy of utilizing subdivisions to require land for affordable housing.
Well, you just explained how that
Yeah.
might actually do both, possibly. So if you
Right.
cluster homes, you have more space.
I actually I don't think that that's listed in this. It's right of first refusal. So in the subdivision process, so looking at 4.5, the headline is identify ways to leverage development and forge public-private partnerships to achieve other community goals such as open space and community housing. So that's goal 4.5. So we've eliminated the Sylvester Manor goal on that section, which kind of takes out the community housing portion because that was the community housing portion. But the strengthened subdivision ordinances to require land for open space, that still has mandatory set-asides, green infrastructure, and right of first refusal of the town. That doesn't include any housing. So because we eliminated the Sylvester Manor, we can eliminate the
Headline?
yeah, the headline that says "and community housing," because that doesn't exist in here anymore.
Good.
Oh,
So that I'll just
actually, that's a really good idea.
take out of there.
But
And then the planned development district for Sylvester Manor, we removed that, that's done. Right of first refusal, it suggests giving town right of first refusal on key lands to protect public interest, whether in nonprofit, public, or semi-public ownership. Putting the town option before community preservation fund does not sound like a good idea to me. So the community preservation fund and the town are kind of one and the same in this when it comes to the open space set aside. It's essentially, but this isn't even, it's not about purchasing the property. So in a subdivision, the homeowner has to set aside a certain portion of that property for open space. Like they can't build on it, it's open space. So it's just the town approving or rejecting the parcel that that homeowner is saying, I'll give you this, but I want all of this in my subdivision. So we've had people be like, we want to give you this land, and this is land that is not good. Like you don't want, you want the good portion, you want the wetlands, you want to preserve the, the nicer parcel. People will be like, here, this is the trash I don't want. That'll be your open space. So it's giving the town right first refusal on their selection.
I think that, though, in this paragraph specifically, though, is saying further on key lands, nonprofit, public, or semi-public ownership to permanently ensure that the public interest is protected. So let's just say Quinnipiac wanted to sell.
Right.
Right of first refusal. That's, I think, here,
The town
that.
would have the first choice of purchasing that
Yeah,
property.
because it's such a key part of our identity.
the
So
only
I,
thing,
yeah, go ahead.
just dropping back to what you said, is
Yeah.
people might want to divide their property when put their undesirable land. That really land is probably very valuable to us as a town environmentally, because that might be the sump area or the recharge area that we really want to try and protect. And so maybe it would be wise for us to spend 2% money on putting that land aside to protect it for the whole island, because that's where rainwater all collects temporarily, the temporary pond, for example. Because we've had situations where people then fill these temporary ponds up. Not really legal, but they do it anyway. On a dry time, they get the DEC come look at it when it's dry, and then, oh, okay, you can fill it.
Yeah.
It does spend half the year basically damp. So we might have to change our policy about that. We mentioned it, we've changed the language of what is desirable to us as a town, that we do put aside these typically undesirable properties for building, but they're desirable for the aquifer.
So the beauty of the subdivision part is we don't have to purchase that. That's their mandatory deed and set aside. So it's great for us because we don't have to pay for it. But what happens sometimes is they take land that they know that they can't build on because of setbacks, because of this, and they try to make the setbacks the gift. And we're like, that doesn't count. It's that kind of thing. So that kind of gives us right of first refusal if we try to play a game.
Yep.
All right. The next one, 221, 1015. I support all the town's efforts to create affordable housing on the island. It's a big, complex issue with a multitude of factors. Creating and subsidizing affordable year-round housing here should be seen as an investment in the infrastructure of the town and should be supported for both workers and seniors on the island. Market rate options are currently out of reach. A big issue noted in this chapter is that seniors do not have small homes or apartments to downsize to. That might otherwise be vacated for growing families. Creating a community land trust would be great as an intermediary nonprofit and long-term steward of sustainable year-round housing options. The question is, what role would the town have in this? I also support the housing size limit. Let's make it smaller than 6,000 square feet. It should include all space, not only living space. Let's stop allowing tear downs to increase the size and price of homes on the island. So the portion of the comment about seniors not being able to downsize into smaller homes or apartments kind of creates the idea that you could create, maybe with the land trust, so you have a non-for-profit that's managing properties, you could create a program if you had the apartments or the smaller homes where maybe a senior could kind of put their home into the affordable housing registry, and then they could downsize, and maybe just the fact they've donated their home could mean that they could downsize and live in that structure.
Well, that's the beauty of this ADU.
Or something like that, if it's kind of like a trading, you could kind of create some kind of program.
see some problems
Where
with
it's like limited,
This ADU program is intended to help with this.
well, yeah.
That the idea being that for seniors, you build the ADU, you move into it, you've now made it hopefully accessible and easy for you to get around because could be new construction, and then you rent out your slightly larger or larger home to a family, on the rent. So
I mean, you're around.
Oh, I see, the ADU on your property, in other
Right,
words.
The grant program is actually, does talk about that and allows you to do that. You would think, oh, you get to build an ADU, but you don't get to live in it, but you could live in it.
Yeah, you could live in it and rent your house out.
Yeah, okay.
So then you can still have that opportunity to downsize.
But that's
on your own
different if I want to
property.
sell my house so that
Yes.
my kids get this big chunk of dough.
Right.
And then I want to move to an apartment because I don't want to leave the island. That's a different scenario.
That is different.
We don't have that.
Oh, yeah, we don't have that option because we
I
just
think
don't have
that's what this is
apartments.
referencing, because I'm not
Yeah.
having kids, they would not be happy if I gave my house to the town.
No,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, but there are some people who have like reverse mortgage to the point where it's almost impossible to then kind of buy back. And there may be some way that the town could make a deal in that.
It's good to have a number of options.
Yeah, just, I mean, that one's like a complicated thing that, I just kind of threw out there, which I won't include here because it's just too much. Community land trust, okay, and then we talked about the house size. All right, 225, page 35 references a discrepancy in the number of total housing units and states that it should be kept in mind. The discrepancy is greater than 10%, and given the importance to the comprehensive plan of the basic metric, what steps are being taken, what is the process to actually analyze the various data sources and to get the actual numbers of total housing units. So,
Well, I think it's a pretty good discussion in that section of, how we tried to get different data sources close so that we could come up with, because all the data sources have different numbers. And so I think this is a good reconciliation and I'm happy with it. If you all want to, read it over again and see if you're happy with it.
What are we talking about? What reconciliation?
The idea of trying to come up with what is the number of housing units on Shelter Island?
Unless they did a door-to-door survey, there's just no way.
And they let me in.
You know,
It's a big if.
yeah,
If you're
I mean,
doing
that's
something.
really asking a lot to
yeah,
get
and,
it accurate.
combining PSE&G's data with the assessor, it really did help kind of target a close number.
Right.
Right.
But it is extremely variable. In looking at the assessor's data, the way everything's tagged and labeled, it's very hard to determine what is like a legitimate accessory apartment, cottage kind of deal, what's just a pool house with a bathroom, what's an empty structure. It's very hard to tell.
But if they had a separate meter for that building, then you can know that that's something being billed separately there. Someone could be living there or not.
So PSE&G's information kind of gave us that,
Right.
like, that data.
Okay.
All right. The next one is 227, 1015. On page 49, there's an action item related to Sylvester Manor. Okay, well, we took care of that. That's gone. Yeah, all right, so that one's done. All right, so those are all of the housing comments on the spreadsheet. So now we have housing comments from, in other sources.
Okay.
Which one do you want to do first, BJ?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
We're going to move on to we've finished the
Email.
chart.
Oh, the
for
emails,
housing, so
right.
the Emails.
Okay. So what I provided for you, what I found was happening on the first meeting that we started discussing the comments on this draft plan, was we was like, wasn't that covered? Isn't it in chapter? You know, so what I thought I would do is just go and try to take a first stab at these comments that people have sent in and put a lot of time into clearly. And just try to say, well, here, I think this is actually covered here, or we've discussed this, or this is good, we need to, you know,
Talk about it further.
yeah. So let's start with Lori Beard, Raymond's, is that okay?
Yep. And that's, we're talking about the email attachment, correct?
Yes, the one that I,
Email comments.
right,
We should follow along by looking at her email.
or, yeah, I sent it to you, when did I send it?
Or yesterday or
Yesterday?
Oh,
Yeah,
wait, yes.
yesterday.
yeah.
And so it has
So see if you see one from me yesterday.
Heights, it starts with Heights.
Oh, yes,
Comp
yes,
Plan.
yes, okay.
Comments?
Is that the one we want to look at?
No, it's actually Lori Beard personally.
At the bottom,
Is that,
Were there multiple attachments?
there are 3 attachments.
let me see.
So I have Heights notes, Heights plan draft.
At the bottom, see,
Yeah, the
Oh, I did
bottom,
see that, yes.
because it was
Oh, that's Lori.
actual,
Okay.
yeah, actual Word doc.
Okay.
Heights comment?
Okay,
It's at the bottom of the email.
no,
No, that's.
go to yesterday. There,
Raymond.
yeah, but that wasn't, that's the, here, open this one. The email, now go to the bottom. There it is. Over there.
Okay, thank you.
That was not easy.
yeah,
That, I was kind of hiding there.
Okay.
Okay, so we are starting back at chapter 1, right? Because we didn't,
Yeah, we didn't go over hers,
Yeah.
we didn't review them.
we haven't reviewed any of the lengthy emails that we received. We just did the people who commented on the chapters.
Right.
So, chapter 1, intro and vision. What community stakeholders were met with in 2021 and when the town was home, mostly due to the pandemic? We will have a list of all meetings and outreach.
Right.
Date to be determined on when that list is ready. But I have that we had 2 public workshops, a visioning workshop and then another, and the survey. Those were in the 2021 timeframe. And in 2022, we had 3 public workshops.
You might want to add, I also spoke with the senior citizens and gathered information to senior citizens at the Silver Circle and the senior citizens. And also we made
In that timeframe?
yes, and we made a Latino outreach, trying to reach the people at that time, the Spanish-speaking, speaking at Catholic church and the Presbyterian church. We reached out to them all.
Yeah, because
and got
we're going out there and talking to people.
right, so we
Okay.
were going out and trying to reach, and you know, that type of
We
thing.
Okay.
also met with all of the Spanish-speaking families in the school,
That's right, then we went there.
and then
Shane
Rebecca
Card and
Jay.
myself met with the Shelter Island Fire Department.
Okay.
And we had some,
We had a meet and greet, was that at Jimbo's house?
Yeah, we had a meet and greet at Mary and Jimbo's house.
Right.
We had members of the
Remember I went
community
there.
come and discuss
yep,
their topics and concerns. We did a number of different sessions.
And again, we are going to pull this together in a document.
yeah.
So it's probably a good idea to just reiterate all of that because it was a long time ago and people have forgotten.
Yeah.
talked to a couple of business owners.
Yeah, I remember that.
On
You
a
went out there,
one-on-one
right.
basis.
Yeah.
I mean, to kind of restate, at that time when we first came together, as the advisory committee, we were, I mean, Ed Hinden at the time as the
Yeah.
chair, kind of put us on an assignment. Get out there, talk
Talk to people.
to the constituents and groups that you're
Right.
connected to, the different types of volunteer groups and nonprofits that are out there, connect with, take our word and our messaging, that stuff that we were working on, and start soliciting comments and stuff. Which is all around, like when the survey had gone out and prior to it. That was like our heavy lift at the time.
Okay, thank you.
And it's actually important to make sure that we don't lose some of that information, because the meeting that we had at the school was very informative.
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of requests for more activities for the high school and middle school students. There were things like that. There was a lot of fear about housing at the time, because it was during COVID and a lot of people had been kicked out of their year-round housing. And there was a lot of upset and fear that they were going to have to leave the island, and it's like the only home their children had known. And, you know, there was a lot of different concerns that were brought
I know
up.
we incorporated a lot of that in previous drafts.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've noted all that. And 2020 profile used for existing conditions was an anomaly year due to the pandemic. Yes, most homes were being used spring, summer, fall, winter by owners who usually only use them seasonally. Most homes had guests, family, friends, as seen by the unusual number of cars and driveways, which I didn't notice, I have to say, but I'm not looking either, you know?
We're also all hiding in our houses.
I was in my house. Yes, but the difficulties of that year are discussed, I believe, completely and understandably in the chapter. So I'm just,
And there's no way to really control for that. I mean, it's gonna skew the statistics no matter how you look at it.
right,
We've
right.
discussed it, I think, I would agree.
Yeah.
I feel very confident the way the consultants have talked about that and you've noted it. There's nothing else we can do.
And we're holding on to trend. That's the big
I think
thing.
that's the important one, the
Right.
trend.
And there's no way for us to know what the true impact is over time until after time has elapsed. And time hasn't elapsed yet. Like,
Right.
we're still
Yeah,
in it,
Right,
really. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
it's,
yeah.
hasn't changed.
We can't say any more about that.
So information gathered by meeting with staff, what staff? Town staff, what town staff? Most of the staff was sent home, required to work from home or closed during some or part of 2020. It does not appear that input was gathered from employees thoroughly. I was the building permits examiner with responsibilities that included, not limited to, and then she lists all her responsibilities, they're extensive. No one spoke to me about the comprehensive plan. On my own time, I submitted comments, data, many comments, data, which a previous member of the CP task force said they never saw. So town staff in the current effort includes, and is not, includes,
All the committees.
Yeah.
The building department, the assessor's office.
Right.
The clerk's office,
and this
Pretty much
pertains
everybody.
especially to updating the data, which is what we needed to do with this go-round. We needed to bring it up.
So you're saying this all happened after,
Yeah, I can't speak to what happened before, but
well, during COVID.
yeah.
it was probably when we reconfigured and we got back into the swing of things. It took us a while to kind of get up to speed.
Yeah, but chief of police, harbor master, building department, highway landfill assessor, CPTF members, we're town staff, clerical staff, you know, we have,
At this point, we've spoken to everybody.
I mean, I think the thing is, her experience was she wasn't consulted back then.
Yes.
And so she wondered, was anyone else consulted? And
Right.
the answer is, well, they were, but unfortunately, it's been later, more recently.
recently, exactly. Okay,
Maybe should we change the language of that section so that it reflects
I
that?
think there was some outreach and discussion with people at the time because we needed to get the basic data that they used for the
Right.
existing conditions. So there was communication with the assessor's office, with the building department. Maybe she just
It
specifically.
was as needed.
right,
I know Ed was working with, he was gathering lots of information at that time.
Right.
From different committees and committee members.
Yeah.
And working with,
But they may not have reached out to all the employees who
Right.
boots on the ground and
they didn't reach out.
could see where they might react to that.
yeah, but, you know, we did have that Dodson and Winkler document that did reflect information and data that, you know,
Yeah.
would exist in the town coffers. A building boom took place in late 2020 to 2022 due to the after effects of the pandemic. This data should be provided, acknowledged as exceptional circumstances due to the pandemic. Many wanted to build extra space for work, family, friends, others. I think, you know, my response is yes. I think that, you know, I kind of feel that revelatory. It's sort of, we know that. But also that Shelter Island, in the same time period, maybe a little bit before the pandemic, right through now, has reached a new level of discovery. I mean, I just feel like there's a building boom that's not necessarily going to ebb because the pandemic has eased.
Unfortunately.
It's over. Hence, yeah, I mean, I just think that, that it's just a new demographic that has discovered us, and those changes, like the pandemic changes, we won't know about till we're 5 or 10 years into it.
And historically, we've had these building boom peaks.
Yes.
That's what goes on. So we're in
Yeah.
the middle of it, or we're witnessing it. That's
Right.
A lot of it is reflected in the economy too. You can see where you have spikes in new construction and then it drops off. And you actually have, when it's low for new construction, because maybe inflation's high, you'll have more renovations, more smaller constructions. And then, you have a nice
Yeah.
But I get
economy.
people's anxiety about this.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and given,
Every time you have a housing boom, there's just that many more houses.
right, exactly.
And you feel like you're not in the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone get that sentiment.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I would suspect, based on mortgage tax data, I think, and some other things, that some of our new demographic are not going to be sensitive to the interest rate increases that we're seeing, the mortgage rate increases, because they're cash people.
Yeah.
So again, that's something that only time will tell, if that's right, if it's going to have an effect here as it's had elsewhere or not, in terms of building permits.
And the other thing that we're not gonna be able to tell is how many people moved out here full-time until we have another good census year. A lot of people retired during COVID
Yeah.
and they made changes to their life. So I know a lot of people who moved here and they live here full-time now, who used to either part-time or summer, or used to rent their house year-round, but during COVID, they made that change and they decided, no, this is gonna be my home now. And I think more of that happened, but we can't capture that statistically until we have another real census. So it's kind of hard to nail down. And to see how long it lasts.
Yeah, because people are also going back.
Yes.
Yeah, they're like, well, it's pretty quiet out here.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back, yeah.
Crickets are
Or
loud.
else we're gonna go to Florida for 3 months.
Yeah.
right.
Well, you have that
Does
too.
that change our demographic?
Yeah.
And again, she goes on to question, how did it skew the data? How does we don't know yet.
But I think we acknowledge that
That they're, yeah.
here's a good example where data isn't always helpful, because you can't necessarily assume it's really telling you the story it looks like it's telling you.
Exactly.
No data is better, right?
Yeah, let's just,
Data was better, but I think you have to look at data pretty cautiously, because you can spin it a number of different ways.
Well, and I think in 5 years from now, when we update the data, we'll be able to see what the actual impact of this
Right.
period
You
of
need
time
some
was.
longevity to really measure that.
We don't have enough
Time.
time, exactly.
please explain what stakeholders, stage 2, what meetings with community stakeholders 2022? No meetings took place with Shelter Island Association or Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation in 2022. Please explain what stakeholders. Is the data adequate? I did, well, 2022 was used to create a draft with the 10 people that were around this table from the community. Draft creation is usually done by a limited number of people. Is the data adequate? I don't know what that means. Because it's not a specific question. Tell me which data you think is not adequate and where we could get it.
Well, there've been a lot more meetings with all of these groups in 2023.
Yeah.
Than there were in 2022.
When we
So-
were creating.
Right, so but I think it's important to recognize that, that yes, it's happened, but it didn't happen in 2022.
Right.
We were busy doing something else.
But I'm gonna interject. During 2022, we opened up the website, we asked for commentary. The
Right.
public has been very encouraged to use that to give us their opinion. People like John Kerr and Sean Clark are in our community very actively gathering information and coming back with commentary, and they've noted that over and over again. And, that is bringing stakeholders,
Right.
comments back. So,
And 2020
so maybe it hasn't been, big meetings like in the fire hall saying, here it is.
Right.
But information has been coming, people have been participating, and we've been having lots and lots of work sessions and meetings along during 2022. So
Absolutely.
to sit there and say that we haven't been gathering, I'm a little offended by
Yeah,
that, because
yeah.
I feel like
we keep acknowledging and reading and taking in and filtering through these lists of comments and doing this. So
Exactly, and not only that, in 2022, I know I had meeting after meeting, email after email with the chief of police and others in that department to get data.
Well, and updating demographics, the census came out in 2022 is when we got that
Right,
information. So-
right, so I mean, yeah, we worked diligently to get.
And I've dampened many parties by opening up a conversation. What do you think about the comprehensive plan? And it's either people, or my ears get talked off, it's.
My parties too, and my
Yeah.
work events also, so.
But at least people have been responding and posting
Right.
throughout as soon as they were able to go on that
No,
website.
I know, and I think that's the transparency of this, and I feel like we have done our due diligence that way, and
I think so.
I think that's been
I
good.
agree.
I'm going to just pause here at 7:52. We know that Jan has a comment. I don't know about the Zoom audience, and maybe more than one, as a matter of fact, comment. There's that. We are not even through chapter 1. I'm not sure if there's not a more efficient way to handle these written things. So I don't know if we all want to think about it and maybe come up with a better way, or we just keep plugging
Well, to be
away.
honest, I appreciate going through them here.
Yes.
Because between work and everything else, I'm having a hard time
Keeping up, keeps a lot.
especially when it comes in like yesterday. But I do want to make sure we acknowledge all of these. So and plus it really helps me at least to hear other viewpoints.
Right.
So I know it is slowing the process down, which is.
Slowing it down. I just want to make sure that everybody's in for the commitment. You know.
Well, I'm thinking the audience too is wondering,
Yeah.
well, they haven't even gotten to my comments yet, but I mean, we're trying to.
But we're
make
trying to
sure
go
we
through
look at
everybody's.
Yeah.
This is important for us to go through this, discuss it,
Yes.
It also
remember
is
back.
very pressure that we
Yes.
remind, that
Yeah.
to Rebecca's point, that we remember what work has gone on for the past
Right.
few years.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
publicly share that again, because not everybody knows, and it's just one of those things that we know. We try to do our due diligence and everything for them, but
Yes. So what do you think, Nate? Open it up, or can keep going with this, or?
We've been,
Let's just finish this. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4 more bullets before we get to chapter
Okay.
2.
Okay.
So let's just finish our chapter 1 so that it's a logical stopping point. And then Jan, it'll be your turn.
I'm happy to wait to another meeting. I mean, I think we should go through the entire thing because it's very dense, but it's very helpful.
Yeah,
I think getting to her.
Chapter 1.
let's get through her chapter 1.
so
Okay.
stage 3, is that where we are?
Yeah, stage 3.
Stage 3, public
Public
workshop was
workshop on-
premature, 8/24/23. Well, we were hoping for input, and we got some.
Noted, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, just noted.
It could have been better, sure.
The workshop meeting took place on 9/23, was ineffective, not enough space, not enough time to go make comments on every board or chapter. I was only able to get around the room in the time provided approximately half the boards representing draft. Chapter 11 was not on the boards for the public to post comments. There was no Chapter 11 boards. Workshops are important information gathering tools, as was this one. If still gathering information, how could this draft be ready for final draft? It's not. So anyway, one public open meeting for the draft, for public comment to the task force is not enough. So many topics, the public is not allowed ample time to comment in public meetings. As the draft evolves, the public should be allowed ample time to review and comment before it goes to the down board, noted. Asking for feedback before the public has had an opportunity to comment on the latest draft is inappropriate. I don't really understand that sentence. Chapters were recently rearranged, renumbered, items added that were not discussed in the CPTF work sessions. I think she means CPAC work sessions. Okay, so my response is there have to be limits on oral presentations in some instances, just because we don't have 24 hours to sit in a meeting. And the point was, write like you have done, write your comments out so that I think that they're better for us to understand, and then therefore to have a better response. Don't forget that the September 23 workshop was also intended to actually engage the public, generate interest in this plan, because we were having, people weren't coming to CPAC. They were not, that's another reason to hold that, even though every comma wasn't in place. And this draft is a draft, and it was a draft designed to elicit commentary, and in that way, 923 was huge.
I think it was
Look
very
at this.
successful. We got a lot of commentary.
Yes.
And a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we
We have a
have,
huge pile of feedback.
Right.
Which we've had to put a deadline on so that we can work furiously to
Right.
keep our brains very active on it, sort it out, compile it, clean it up, and get the next draft so that we can solicit more comments and filter through
Right.
and work through. So that's the process. So we're all working very, very hard on top of everything else that we do. So
My students are writing draft papers, and I tell them, try to make it as complete as you can, but it's a draft. I can give way better feedback if you show me something than if you just say, tell me about what I should do. And I think that's what we were doing. I don't think any of us thought this was a fait accompli, it's done. But if we figured if you give you something to look at, then you can get
Bodies wish to
reaction.
respond.
Yeah, and
reaction, yeah.
I think we did.
And if I walked around the room and the discussions going on from people all over the place. They weren't even at the board. They were just having out and out discussions about everything.
And clearly, people got the message.
Questions about things too.
Yeah.
That was the other thing going.
They continued to send them in. So if they didn't get a chance to speak, hopefully they did in fact send them in, because clearly
Oh,
you
we
received them.
Yep.
Quite a lot.
Yep.
And I think it did help that it helped raise awareness, it helped getting people talking. And we did get feedback after the fact, after the meeting. I know a few people came in and because they didn't get a chance to do their comments on the boards at the time, they came in and did them later, which is fine. We left the comment period open until the 15th. So they made their comments before the 15th. And so, I think having the boards up in town hall is good. People can come in and read them. It's very open to the public, very open for comment. So
I think the subtext here is simply that don't rush it.
Right.
Make sure that you do hear people's views, make sure we get a chance to see what, and I think that's a legitimate point.
People still make comments?
no, we're trying to close it so that we can really.
Right, I know it was our intent, but I just wondered if how it was actually working. Are they, okay.
it closed on Sunday, the 15th.
Yeah, I know. I just wondered if because the little blurb on the bottom of the draft still shows that you can use it. So I'm just wondering if.
Well, and that was in the paper too, by the way, that you could, which I think.
Still be a comment.
Yeah, which I think is confusing because at some point you have to at least say, all right, we're going to work with everything we've received so far.
right,
Then we'll come back and say,
the draft, yeah,
was your concern addressed?
exactly.
Because some of these comments are redundant, other people have made them.
Yeah, well, which means that they're important because
Yeah.
they come up again and again.
Then Lori goes on to talk about the guiding principles of chapter 1 and responsible, I think her point number 1, well taken. Responsible stewardship, we say should be considered, and she says shall. And I think noted, and we should change that. It's
Oh, yeah, that's our change of language, yes.
and change.
Yeah.
This, okay, because that's just, I don't think anybody can object to that. The next suggestion, the 2, 3, and 4, they're not really suggestions that belong in principle, in guidelines, if you ask me. The information being provided to the committees from applications is flawed, insufficient, often incomplete. I don't think that's part of guidelines. It's again, that's a suggestion, a recommendation. Not sure where it would even go in this
I
plan.
think it goes in governance, reviewing
that's
the
what I was gonna
permitting
say.
and application process for all the boards and committees. Reviewing the application process for the planning board, reviewing the application process for the ZBA. Even, because that's where, yeah.
For
even
all the committees, for all applicable committees, okay,
Yeah, I think that's what,
good. Vibrant year-round island community incentives should be considered for hotels and restaurants that are affordable and stay open year-round. Too many, I couldn't agree with her more, I love going out, but if the economics aren't there, they're not there. I mean, the one, I won't say who, one of the restaurants just laid off about half their staff. I mean, and it's not, we're not even in winter yet. Rainy weekends don't help, but they're especially damaging at this time of year. So sentiment agreed with, but I don't think it's a guiding principle for us. Motivate and enable upcoming generations, encourage businesses to mentor students, schedule committee meetings 7 p.m. later so people have time to get home from work. Again, this is not necessarily a principle, and I do believe we talk pretty completely about apprenticeships program, starting a SCORE chapter for the seniors to interact. I mean, I think that maybe Lori read this chapter before she had gotten to that
Oh, good.
spot. Yeah, okay. All right. You see.
Okay, chapter 2.
Actually, the schools, Jimbo's actually, Thine
Is
is
he
actually
doing-
working on an internship thing, because we're actually doing an interview with him at the
Oh,
Nature
wow.
Conservancy and stuff. So those kind of things are happening, so.
Would that internship include,
Her chapter
Down?
2 isn't that long. Do we want to
just
get
do
caught
it?
up to chapter 3? Because
I
I
will.
think we should.
people
Okay.
don't mind.
What time is it? What's 8?
Oh, it's just not
It
even,
depends how much time you want to allow for commentary.
I think her chapter 2 is short enough that we
It is
can
short.
still get some commentary
Yeah.
without
Again,
getting too crazy.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah, it is pretty short.
It's pretty short.
Okay.
the data, chapter 2, so data 2020 census was used, pandemic data. Data is outdated in an anomaly year due to pandemic. 2020 data and 2021 data should either be not used or used knowing the numbers will be higher for everything. And I think this is discussed. Household income grown. In other words, it's in chapter 2, it's mentioned that household income has grown as well as the level of poverty, the number of people in poverty has too. No mention of the second homeowners who were buying property like crazy at asking prices or above to escape the pandemic. Numbers were skewed due to this anomaly.
It's like we just said though, right?
Right, and the fact remains, and it may be, the fact that it happened does remain. Even if it, for whatever reason it happened. And as we said, we're going to follow the trend in the years to come. No mention of the number of homes rented and how it changed to longer-term rentals due to pandemic. Longer rental durations / used weekends only during later in the pandemic. Saw many more off-season rentals, noted, but I'm not sure why that would be,
Right. Well, this is another one where the data is very hard to collect on
Right.
that.
Yeah.
how do we
Because
get that?
and it's hard to get the data when you're in the middle of it.
Right.
We're still not outside of that.
Okay, so data would
Percent
be,
of non-family households increased due to housing costs, due to pandemic buying from second homeowners during pandemic.
true.
Yep.
But, I think we kind of get to these points in just maybe not the way that Lori would have done it had she done it herself,
Then the income average of 100,000 is skewed again due to second homeowners and no separation between second homeowners and primary
I
homeowners.
don't understand that separation, but yeah,
Same with age.
yeah.
Well, I mean, that's this, so we always get in trouble whenever we try to differentiate full-time versus part-time versus seasonal versus rental. And it's a complicated amount of data. It's very hard to nail any of it down. And, as you can tell by.
They've seen it's fraught, the language is fraught.
The language is fraught. It is a quagmire of.
And I think
Challenge.
one thing she didn't mention that really should be noted, retirees who come here full-time definitely influence the income.
Yeah, that's why we now have
Net
a greater,
numbers.
yeah,
Disparity,
disparity.
we're bifurcated.
Yeah.
Correct.
Recommend an assessment of need or at least discussion of island poverty, which we do later.
Right.
What else is needed, yes, and I think maybe we'll get to that point. We have some good commentary. We've received good commentary that will help guide us in that. No mention of drugs or drug use. I'm not sure that should be in the demographic chapter.
No, that's got to be quality of.
It's in quality of life.
Yeah.
And we do discuss it a little bit in quality of life, but there isn't an extensive discussion on it.
No.
Because we actually don't have a significant amount of. When it comes down to it, we don't have a ton of arrests, like any hospitalizations related to it aren't necessarily reported in a way that we could track or structure,
Yeah.
uses of drugs aren't necessarily tracked in a way where we can say, oh, you get this many overdoses in a year, unless it's a fatal overdose, then but it's very
They still
hard.
monitor that or keep track of that?
They do, but the data wasn't.
I think this is best discussed in a discussion which we have of
Yeah.
mental health.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
I think that
We'll
drug
dig
problems are
into this
mental
in
health
quality of
issues.
life.
Drug use is mental health.
That's a combination of things.
I'll circle back to PD too and see if they have better data on it, but
Or EMS.
EMS is not gonna share.
Not gonna share.
Not even gross numbers, not even like.
No.
No. So,
All right.
you know,
HIPAA,
there's a lot of.
Well, there's certainly
Privacy
plenty in the
rights
police
and-
water every week.
Well, yeah.
Not a lot of it is drugs, I gotta be honest.
But I mean, it's about crime, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
abuse and fighting, there's a lot of that going
Well, and
on.
they're not gonna give you information on if they're in the middle of, you know,
Yeah.
doing a sting or something. I mean, I don't know.
Well, you've got HIPAA laws and all sorts of things you gotta keep quiet about, yeah,
Yeah.
to share.
Okay,
But,
so-
you know, it's a problem. We do have it.
okay, so we go to Mr. Sudol first.
Have to continue on Lori.
No, we're done.
We're done.
We want to go to comments now and
We'll return to her next week.
yeah,
Whatever.
stay tuned.
We want to get up to chapter 3 at least for everybody, so
Yeah,
now
We're
we're
gonna finish her letter.
Eventually, yeah.
yeah, next week. We'll start with her at the next meeting, right?
we're trying to just keep to the chapters we've already discussed, and we're kind of catching up with her, so we just made it to her chapter 3. And we'll do your chapter 3 at the next meeting, and we'll move on from there. We'll do 3 and 4.
Mhm.
So now we're all up to the same spot on everybody. Because we will go. All right, does anybody in the room have comment? Anything they'd like to say? Anybody online?
Yes,
Kim?
hi. I just want to ask again, I wrote a letter as, the Shelter Island Association that we asked the town board, this task force, and BFJ to please, in the next draft, revise chapter 3 on zoning so that it actually includes what you're doing on zoning. It includes the zoning changes and implications. The comprehensive plan, as I've said so many times, has very important things to say, but the quintessential thing that it says and the thing that it rules going forward is zoning. And therefore, because zoning changes have a cumulative effect, their specifics and the rationale should be in the zoning chapter, even if they're applicable to other topics. So we've still got them, as I understand it, distributed throughout, but we have an opportunity in this next draft to put the zoning changes in one place. I understand by listening to the last several meetings that you've removed some critical aspects, such as tailored zoning for Sylvester Manor, that's coming out altogether. The planned district developments are also coming out altogether. It's going to be very clear that there won't be, I hesitate to use the term spot zoning, but I will, spot zoning for hotels. And I think all these things need to be clearly stated. Earlier in the meeting, the group discussed how do we reference the existing zoning code to benchmark for this comprehensive plan? And how do we tighten up the special permit process that hasn't served us well in the past? And Wendy, interestingly said, give me something to look at. So I am going to send you something to look at that's very specific on how you can accomplish what you want to do based on your earlier statements tonight. And that's going to be a combination of the same comments I've been sending from the Shelter Island Association about the nearshore overlay. And in addition, I'm going to include some ideas about how you can tighten up the special permit process.
Done with the comments on this. I don't think I wouldn't encourage this. Okay.
What, you don't like that, BJ?
I was saying this draft, the comment period, it ended on Sunday.
Well, aren't you going to be going through all this stuff to do another draft? Which my
Yeah.
question would be, okay, if I know you've said we can't predict the future, BJ, but do you have any idea when the next draft might come out?
No, we're on we just finished chapter 4, and we're not actually done yet with the comments that we received on chapters 1 through 4. So how in the world would I predict, really? So, and we asked this
No, I'm
same
not trying
question.
to, I'm not
No,
trying to
no,
be
no, no, let me finish, let me
oppositional.
finish, let me finish. The same question is asked at every meeting. It's really kind of getting to be, it's beyond comical. So stop asking, we are in the process, we're just doing it. That's number one. Number two, there was a reason to end the comment period with the 15th, so that we could work on and get to a new draft. And then there's more comment. So I think we should
You
hold.
find this unhelpful
hold with
that
that.
I'm giving you some ideas about what you should talk about with BFJ to do the new draft? You find this unhelpful?
Kim, we have all of your previous comments, and like you just said, that you were going to reiterate some of those previous comments and send them back to us. We do have your comments on record. They are in the spreadsheet, and they're just organized according to the topic chapter. So when we get to that chapter, we'll be able to discuss them. One of the things we did discuss at the last meeting was that the title of chapter 3 was misleading, and we were going to rename it Existing Built Conditions and Zoning, so that people understand that it's actually a summary of our existing conditions. And so it's those existing conditions that then the rest of the chapters build off of. And we did also discuss at the last meeting that at the end of chapter 3, we would list all of the zoning changes and what chapters they could be found in. So, for example, all the housing zoning changes with a brief description listed, and you can find them in chapter 4,
Already exists in
page,
chapter
whatever.
11 now.
you know, and then they are all summarized in chapter 11.
I was going
So,
to say, yeah, page 4 in chapter 11 has a whole series of zoning and land use recommendations.
right. So we may also draft that at the end of chapter 3 so people can see where those changes can be found. So we will make those adjustments, Kim.
I actually really like the idea.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, and as I understand it, once again, the tailored zoning comments gonna be, and the PDD is not gonna be in there, and some other things that you've already said. I really do appreciate. Thank you so much for making that clear. Thank you again.
No problem. And you're right, we did eliminate the Sylvester Manor goal with the PDD. We did not include a hotel zone. That was actually never a recommendation. So that's not included in this. And so, yeah, your concerns there have been met.
Thanks again. Really
No
appreciate it.
problem. Anybody else? Jerry?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Wendy said. I want to reiterate what Wendy said that these are, forgot the word he used, suggestions, and that it's not policy, it's not, you're not making zoning changes, you're suggesting, you're putting potential changes in. So when Kim says, well, what are all the changes? There are no changes. The changes have to come before the town board. Town board will have hearings, and they'll decide on what the actual changes are. This is just a plan to talk about changes. I think that has to get out there. I don't know if people don't understand it or they don't want to understand it.
Well, I think though, the other thing we talked about last time was that we want to kind of shape a plan with language that is strong enough so it has a direction and it isn't so open-ended, like, well, why don't you talk about zoning? But, maybe we should really focus on or think about limiting size of houses. And then, of course, it still has to go before the town board, the zone. They are the ones who make that decision, but that the plan should at least have that
And I think
articulated goals.
one of the things that we are accomplishing in this process, or, even though we're not even halfway through it, but we're tightening up language. So we're changing should to shall. To use Jan's terminology, which I love, we're getting less woolly-headed about this. I think. I mean, I really, I do feel that, because we're getting the public to say. They're telling us,
Yeah.
we're not.
I think, BJ, one of the biggest things the town board has learned from this and from some of the applications we're getting for permits is that we need to address the code.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that, maybe it's not the feel-good right thing to do, but right now it's the legal thing to do.
Right.
And if that's not what we want, then we have to change the town code.
Right, because you can't just deny people.
Exactly.
If
Right.
your code is not up to
Right.
snuff. That's true. That's true. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Did you want?
Yeah.
So my letter will be discussed next,
We hope.
Yes.
I think we should, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Working our way.
I mean, next meeting. yeah.
Yes, yes.
Because your
Through
first
chapter 4.
Chapter 3. So we'll
Yeah.
discuss Lori's chapter 3, your chapter 3, the Heights is chapter 3, and then we'll dig into chapter 4.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we're going by chapter. So we'll do your next week.
So I guess we apologize, we didn't get to it tonight.
Yeah, that's fine. I just have a comment here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just say who you are again for the record.
Jan Sudo. So I just want to first respond to the comment of the supervisor that, oh, this is just general direction, doesn't mean zoning changes and, and so on, so don't worry about it. I mean, many of us do not see it this way, because if there is a directive in comprehensive plan, like, for example, over the next 10-year, implement public water island-wide, okay? So this is a directive, and then everything the town does from then on has to be conformant to this, okay? Same with other directives, okay? So it is important, okay? And therefore, that's why we're scrutinizing the language there, to see what the future town boards will be obligated to do or not to do, okay? And then a couple comments that I've heard here that limit density, also mentioning that basically there will never be more than 2 units per acre, okay? So this needs to be tightened up, because that sounds to us like doubling density to half an acre, okay? The current code says in zone A and C, what's allowed is primary structure and ADU. And actually, it should be specified like this, and there's a loophole in the town code because the maximum size of ADU is not defined. So that should be defined, because right now we have a situation that it's 7 Chickwit. People are proposing 2,400 square feet ADU, bigger than many houses here. And in addition, part of it is in wetlands, and somehow wetland,
What's in the vegetative buffer?
in the, between 75 and.
That's called the
That should not be allowed somehow. And
That's a code issue.
it seems like somehow this shouldn't go through this planning board, okay? But it did, and they're saying they have no choice, okay? So if they have no choice, that has to be eliminated and this loophole closed. And there are, like, the town code right now is full of loopholes, okay? There are special permits, everybody gets that 10,000 square foot house if they want to, they just, go through the additional hassle, okay? But I would even suggest that special permits should be eliminated, period, okay? Close that loophole so people cannot exploit that, okay? ZBA, the same thing, if there's a setback violation or some other non-conformance, they just go through the ZBA process. So why not eliminate it?
Because legally, we must have it.
Yeah.
But,
That's
yeah,
by state law, that's
we
not.
have to have an appellate process.
Okay, but perhaps could be tightened what's allowed there.
The guidelines could be straight,
Guidelines, so
which we talked about last
so
week.
it's only in extraordinary circumstances, okay?
Yeah, we did talk about that. We talked about what is a hardship, right, guidelines.
Yeah, but we have a situation when a certain house is applying for a dog and they're violating the site setback and they're providing some fake, not credible hardship letter, and they're gonna bypass this whole thing. All they need to do is 1-page hardship letter, you know what I mean? So things like this should be eliminated or should be extraordinarily difficult. And the house sizes should be limited to 6,000 square feet, period, okay, no exceptions. So for example, if you go to Nassau County, Manhasset, or some other towns, they had a 6,000 square foot hard limit on the house sizes for decades, you know what I mean? And it's impossible to get around that. So.
And what do we do about illegal conversions? So I got a 6,000 square foot house, SFLA, and I got a 2,000 square foot attic and a 2,000 square foot basement. And everybody's gone, I got my
It's an
seat.
issue of enforcement, but here,
there's
that's
no
another comment I have that, in
Wait a-
chapter 4, there was a proposition to limit on first acre that you can only build 30 to 100 square feet, the second
It was an example.
50 to 100. I think this should be taken out because this is really
I
suggesting.
think we agreed with that, to take out the example because it's misleading.
Right.
Sorry, so I'm behind you, okay? But, so I think the most important thing is maybe to focus and put a hard limit that cannot be bypassed. Okay, period. Okay, and, but like restricting the what's buildable on first acre, I don't know if this is well thought out, because, you know, why? I mean, if
Maybe too restrictive.
I think it's too restrictive, and the people are restricted in what they can build
Right.
already by the current zoning. I don't think there's anything wrong there. There's a
You hit
building-
that balance between my individual right to do something with my property and the community's interest. I mean, I would totally agree with you. 6,000 sounds huge to me.
Yeah,
I would say nothing above that. But then you're going to get people that are saying, but wait, it's my property. I have 2 acres here. I
well,
want
yeah, but
Yeah, 5 acres, whatever.
But that's been done in, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. In Nassau County, it's impossible to bypass this. I've been looking at Manhasset, just familiar with that term. Impossible. If you have unfinished attic, will never get finished. If you have unfinished basement, will never get finished. Unless it's done illegally, but, you know.
Right.
That's what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to
Yeah,
eliminate.
but then people want to sell and they have to get certificate of occupancy, and they're in big trouble.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been considering with the moratorium is instead of having a special permit process, making it an area variance, which has a very different set of standards. So when you go to the ZBA for an area variance for bulk, you want a larger home than is permitted, you have to really prove a genuine hardship. It's much harder to get an area variance than it is to get a special permit. It's just a very different set of
It
standards.
depends who is on ZBA. So
That's
if there are exceptions, people will use it. You know? So if you want the code to stick, then you got to eliminate all the exceptions, except in extraordinary circumstances.
Right, well, that's what it would then turn into. You know, it would have to be an extraordinary circumstance for the ZBA to approve an exception to that rule. And it's going to be very hard for you to demonstrate that you need more than 6,000 square feet in a home. So that's, you know, that would be.
Well, nobody
the goal.
cares what they need. I mean, this is what's allowed. You know what I mean? If you need 12,000 square foot house, go to Southampton.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Right. Anything else?
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else on Zoom?
Actually, I have one more comment. I just wanted to second what Meg was saying a minute ago about the different standard, which is variance instead of special permit. And I totally agree. And I think it should apply especially to commercial development as well as residential.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Pam, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just something quick for you folks. I'm just curious about, well, 2 things. You're going to finish this as a final draft, and then will it go
No.
to the Suffolk County Planning Commission? I mean,
No,
I
this
realize it's
won't-
going to go
no.
back to BFJ, and then once that final draft is devised by BFJ, it will then go to Suffolk County Planning Commission for their review as an involved agency. Is that
No,
correct?
but don't call it a final draft.
Okay, so I can answer this.
Yeah.
So this current draft has been sent to Suffolk County Planning to get on their calendar because it's very hard to get on their calendar. And then the next draft will also be submitted to Suffolk County Planning with the list of the changes so that they can see our process. I believe it was sent out, Friday? We sent it out, we emailed it to them.
Yeah.
So just to get on the calendar because they have a long wait time and it's good for them to have a chance to look at it and let us know if we're even in the right direction.
Right.
So this current draft has been submitted to them. And then after all of our revisions, then they will also receive the next draft. And, you know, whatever draft ends up going to the planning board, the town board, they will see that as well.
Right.
Does that
Okay.
answer your
And then-
question?
Yeah, it did. And then, thank you. And then the secret analysis would happen when you have that final draft from BFJ, is that correct?
Correct. That'll happen at the final draft at the town board level after the Suffolk County Planning has reviewed it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. It's been very enlightening this evening. Have a great night.
You too.
You too.
Might be great if we could include that sequencing in the minutes, just so that anyone reading the minutes could see exactly how this all proceeds.
Too.
Sounds good. All right, anybody else? Julie, you got anything?
Just killing me. Sorry, I just had to
No,
stand
back
up.
is killing me.
My back's killing me.
All right, no further comments. I make a
Yeah, me
motion
too.
to go home.
Yes.
And
All in favor?